picture a castle in your mind right now. Go on. You already have the image because you have seen it 1,000 times. Grey stone towers against a clean blue sky, bright banners snapping in the wind, a great hall lit like a cathedral, a long table groaning with roast meat, a lord in furs and a lady in a flowing gown, everything tidy, everything noble, everything just a little bit magical. Hold that picture in your head because over the next 38 minutes we are going to take it apart, stone by stone, and put something far stranger and far more human in its place. This is a castle in the year 1200, and this is what it was actually like to live inside one. Not the postcard, not the film set, the cold, the dark, the smell, the crowd, and the astonishing machine of survival that a castle really was. Almost none of this made it into the storybooks. So let's open the gate and walk in. Before we take a single step through that gate, we have to clear away the story you think you know because it is getting in the way. When we imagine a medieval castle, we imagine two things at once, and both of them are wrong. First, we imagine a fairy tale, all penance and pageantry and knights in shining armor. Second, and just as misleading, we imagine a pure war machine, a grim fortress that exists only to be attacked and defended in spectacular sieges. The truth sits in a much more interesting place. A castle in the year 1200 was, above everything else, a home and a headquarters. It was where a lord lived, ruled, ate, slept, and did the endless, boring work of controlling the land around him. Sieges were rare. The everyday reality was not battle. It was breakfast and firewood and mud, and dozens of people trying to keep one enormous stone building warm, fed, and running. That everyday reality is the secret the books almost never show, and it is the one we are here for. So let's place ourselves. It is the year 1200, and you are standing in the muddy bailey of a stone castle somewhere in the north of France or England. Think of the great castles Richard the Lionheart was building only a couple of years before this, perched above a river, and imagine yourself just inside its walls at first light. This is not a royal palace. It belongs to a baron, a middling lord with lands to control and enemies to worry about. And it is only 2 or 3 generations since his ancestors would have lived in a castle made largely of timber and earth. This one is stone now, which makes it stronger, grander, and, as you are about to discover, colder and darker than almost anything you have ever slept in. The sun is barely up. The air is grey. Somewhere a cockerel is screaming, a dog is barking, and a servant is already carrying something heavy across the yard. Your day in the year 1200 is beginning, and the first thing this castle is going to teach you is not about knights or glory. It is about the cold, because the cold is the first thing that hits you and it never really lets go. You have to understand what stone actually does. Those thick walls that look so solid and so grand are, in the cold half of the year, essentially giant blocks of chilled, damp rock wrapped around you. Stone holds the cold. Stone breathes damp. On a winter morning, the wall beside your head is not just cool to the touch, it is wet, beaded with moisture, and the chill of it soaks into your bones in a way that a modern heated room simply cannot teach you. There is no central heating, no radiator, no glass in most of the windows to keep the weather out. There are fireplaces, yes, and in the year 1200, the wall fireplace with a chimney is a genuine luxury, a real improvement on the old, smoky central hearth. But a fire warms a small pool of air directly in front of it, and almost nothing beyond. Step 3 paces back from the flames, and you are cold again. This is why people in a castle wear layers of wool indoors, why they crave heavy hangings on the walls, why the bed with its thick curtains is not a decoration, but a survival tool, a little tent of trapped body heat in a room that is otherwise close to freezing. Warmth, real warmth, is something you chase all winter and rarely catch. And it is dark. This is the part that surprises people most because films light these interiors as if the sun were pouring in. It was not. Glass in windows was rare and hugely expensive in the year 1200, so most windows are not windows as you know them at all. They are openings, often narrow, sometimes little more than slits, closed against the weather with wooden shutters. And here is the cruel trade you live with every single day. Open the shutters and you let in light, but you also let in the cold, the wind, and the rain. Close them and you are warmer, but now you are sitting in near darkness in the middle of the day. So the inside of a castle is a world of gloom. The corners are always dim. The staircases inside the walls are pitch black. An artificial light is not free the way flipping a switch is free. Candles of beeswax burn clean and bright, but they are costly, reserved for the Lord's table and the chapel. Most light comes from tallow, candles, and lamps made of rendered animal fat, which are cheaper but smoky and smell of the kitchen, or from rushlights, dried reeds soaked in grease that burn for only a few minutes each. So light itself is rationed. When the sun goes down, most of the castle simply goes dark, and people go to bed because staying up costs money you can see burning away in front of you. Now let's talk about the thing no book will ever describe to you because ink does not carry it: the smell. Close your eyes inside this castle and breathe in, and you meet a wall of odor that a modern person would find genuinely overwhelming. Start with wood smoke, which is in everything, in the air, in the stone, in your clothes and your hair, because there are fires burning all day for warmth and cooking. Add to that the tallow lamps and their greasy tang. Add the animals, because a castle is full of them. Dogs underfoot in the hall, horses in the stables, pigs and chickens in the yard, and the manure that all of them produce. Add the people, dozens of them in a world where a full body wash is occasional and clean clothes are a luxury of the rich. Add the latrines, which we will come to in all their glory shortly, and the general dampness, the mildew that grows on stone that never fully dries. And add the floor itself. In the great hall, the floor is often strewn with rushes and straw, which sounds rustic and pleasant until you learn what ends up in it. Scraps of food, bones tossed to the dogs, spilled ale, grease, and worse from the animals, all trodden into the layer of reeds underfoot. Fresh rushes get scattered on top, but the bottom of the pile is not always dug out as often as it should be. So the honest truth of walking into a medieval great hall is not the crisp air of a stone cathedral. It is warm, close, smoky, and pungent, the smell of a great many living creatures sharing one enormous room. And that word, many, is the next thing the books almost never show, because when you imagine a castle, you probably imagine a lord, a lady, a handful of knights, maybe a servant or two carrying a tray. Empty the picture of that quiet elegance. A working castle in the year 1200 is not a private house. It is closer to a small, crowded, fortified village crammed inside a set of walls, and it is loud, and it is busy from before dawn until after dark. The lord and his family are only the tiny apex of it. Beneath them lives an entire population whose whole purpose is to keep this stone machine running. There are cooks and kitchen boys, brewers and bakers, a steward who manages the whole estate, and a chamberlain who runs the household. There are grooms for the horses, a blacksmith at his forge, a carpenter, perhaps a chaplain for the chapel, and a clerk who can read and write, which most people here cannot. There are laundresses, seamstresses, the ladies' attendants, and a small crowd of general servants who fetch, carry, clean, and haul. And there is the garrison, the fighting men, though in peacetime this is often a modest number of guards rather than an army. Add them all up, and even a modest baron's castle might shelter, feed, and house dozens of people day in and day out, swelling to far more when the Lord holds a great feast or musters for war. You are never, ever alone in a castle. Privacy, as you will see, is very nearly a thing that does not exist. Let's meet the beating heart of this crowded world, the one room that matters more than any other. The Great Hall. Forget the private living rooms of a modern house. In the year 1200, the hall is where almost everything happens. It is the dining room, the throne room, the courtroom, the office, the reception hall, and for many of the household, at night, it is also the bedroom. This is the largest space in the castle, and it is designed to impress. At one end, often on a raised platform called the dais, sits the Lord's table, and this is where you learn that in a castle, even the seating is a language. Where you sit tells everyone exactly what you are worth. Great importance is placed on a single dish, the salt cellar, a container of salt set on the high table. To sit above the salt, near the Lord, is to be honored. To sit below the salt is to know your lower place. Every meal is a quiet, precise performance of who ranks above whom, and everyone in the room can read it at a glance. And the meals themselves are not the constant riot of roast meat that films love to show. Yes, the Lord eats well, better than almost anyone else in medieval society, with meat, game, fish on the many holy days when meat is forbidden, bread and wine or fine ale. But the everyday diet, even here, leans heavily on bread and pottage, a thick stew of grains and vegetables, and the further down the household you sit, the plainer your food becomes. There are no forks. People eat with a knife, a spoon, and their fingers from shared dishes, and in many households, the poorer diners eat off a trencher, a thick slab of stale bread that soaks up the food and can afterwards be eaten or given to the poor. Manners exist, and they are strict, but they are the manners of a shared table in a smoky hall, not the polished banquet of a costume drama. And when the meal is cleared, the same hall that fed you becomes something else entirely. Because at night, the great hall fills with sleepers. This is one of the details that most surprises people. Where do all those dozens of servants and lower household members actually sleep? For many of them, the answer is right here, on the floor of the hall where they just ate. When the tables, which are often just boards laid on trestles, are taken down, the hall is cleared and people bed down on benches, on pallets, on the rush-strewn floor, wrapped in their cloaks near the dying warmth of the fire. The lord and lady, by the year 1200, increasingly have a private chamber, the Great Chamber, or sola, a room set apart where they can sleep and withdraw from the crowd. And this rising desire for a private room of one's own is one of the quiet revolutions of the age. But even their privacy is relative, because trusted servants often sleep in or just outside that chamber, ready to serve at any hour. The idea that each person, or even each family, has their own separate bedroom behind a closed door is simply not how this world works. You sleep among others, you wake among others, and you are rarely out of earshot of another human being. Now, none of this crowd survives without the single most demanding operation in the whole castle, the one that runs hardest and longest every day, feeding everyone. The kitchen is a world of its own, and in a well-built castle of this period, it is often housed slightly apart from the hall, or built with special care for one very good reason: fire. Cooking is done over open flames and in great ovens, with enormous cauldrons and roasting spits, and a kitchen fire that gets out of control can burn down a whole timber-roofed range in minutes. So the kitchen is at once essential and dangerous, hot, frantic and smoky, with cooks and boys sweating over the fires from before dawn. And the logistics behind that kitchen are staggering when you stop to think about them, which almost no one does. To feed dozens of people every single day, a castle needs a constant, reliable stream of supplies, grain to be ground into flour and baked into the daily bread, meat, live animals brought in and slaughtered, or salted and preserved for the lean months, ale and lots of it, firewood in quantities that are hard to imagine, cut, hauled, and stacked endlessly, because every fire in the place eats wood all day long. Managing all of this, making sure the storerooms are full and the castle does not simply run out, is the real, unglamorous work of the steward and his staff, and it never stops. And here is a detail that catches everyone off guard. What did they drink? The romantic answer is wine, and the Lord does drink wine, but the everyday drink of the castle, for almost everyone, from the Lord's family down to the lowest servant, is ale. Not mainly because they wanted to be merry, but for a deeply practical reason. In a crowded place, clean drinking water is not something you can take for granted, and people had learned, without understanding the germs behind it, that water could make you sick, while ale, which is boiled as part of brewing, was safer, so ale is not a treat here. It is a daily staple, brewed constantly on site, often weaker than what we would call beer today, and drunk by adults and children alike throughout the day. The brew house is as vital as the bakery, and a castle that runs short of ale is a castle in trouble. Think about that the next time you picture a medieval table. The mug in nearly every hand is there because it was, quite literally, safer than the water. Which brings us to water itself and to one of the most important and least glamorous features in the entire castle. The well. Everything, absolutely everything, depends on water. You need it for brewing, for cooking, for washing, for the animals, for putting out fires. And in the year 1200, there are no pipes bringing fresh water to your rooms. Water is hauled bucket by bucket from a well or a cistern by hand and carried wherever it is needed, upstairs, across the yard, into the kitchen, all day long. This is one of those invisible back-breaking tasks that the whole life of the castle silently rests upon. And the well is not just a convenience, it is a matter of life and death, because it is your lifeline if the castle is ever besieged. A castle without a secure, protected source of water inside its walls cannot hold out. An enemy does not always need to breach your walls. He only needs to sit outside them and wait, and if your well fails or your enemy can reach it, thirst will open the gates for him. So the well is guarded, valued, and often placed deep within the strongest part of the castle. It is not the sword that decides a siege, it is the water and the food and how long they last. That is a lesson this channel keeps coming back to because history keeps teaching it. Step back for a moment and look at the whole picture, and you start to see the castle for what it truly is. Not a monument, a machine. And that machine runs on an enormous amount of invisible human labor that the stories almost always leave out. Every warm fire means someone chopped and carried the wood. Every meal means someone hauled the water, ground the flour, tended the ovens, and scrubbed the pots afterward. Every clean shirt means a laundress worked for hours over harsh soap and cold water, wringing and drying by hand. The rushes on the floor, the candles trimmed, the horses fed and mucked out, the fires banked at night and lit again at dawn, all of it is human hands, working from before first light until after dark. There are no machines to help them, no plumbing, no engines, nothing but muscle and time. When you strip away the banners and the romance, this is what a castle really was. A vast, demanding household kept alive by the ceaseless labor of dozens of ordinary people whose names history did not bother to record. The Lord in his furs is only the visible tip of it. The castle stands because they carry it every single day. Now for the detail everyone secretly wonders about and no storybook will tell you. The toilet. What did they actually do? The answer is the garderobe. This is a small latrine, often built into the thickness of the outer wall or projecting out from it on a little stone platform with a simple seat over a shaft. And that shaft does exactly what you fear. It drops straight down, emptying either into the moat or down the outside of the wall, or into a pit that some unlucky soul whose actual job this was had to periodically clean out. There is no flushing, there is no privacy screen worthy of the name. In the cold months, the garderobe is a freezing, drafty little cell, open to the shaft and the winter wind howling up it. There is no soft paper, only rags, moss, hay, or whatever came to hand. And that curious name, garderobe, which sounds like a wardrobe, is thought to come from the practice of hanging clothes near it, because the strong ammonia smell was believed to help keep moths and fleas out of the fabric. Sit with that for a second. Their toilet doubled as their moth repellent. Grand castles might have several garderobes serving different parts of the building, but for dozens of people this is still a very limited, very basic, and very cold arrangement. And it is one of the honest realities behind the grandeur. And that leads us straight into the truth about cleanliness, which is more complicated than the insult we usually throw at the past. Medieval people were not indifferent to being clean. They valued washing the hands and face, especially before and after meals, where a servant would bring a basin and a towel to the table. They knew about bathing, and a great lord might have a wooden tub filled with heated water for a proper soak, a real luxury, given how much water and firewood it swallowed. But a full body bath was an occasional event, not a daily habit, because heating that much water by hand was enormously expensive in labor and fuel. The result is a world where people manage their cleanliness in patches, hands and face often, the whole body rarely, in clothes that could not be washed anywhere near as often as ours. And they shared their homes with an ever-present population of uninvited guests. Fleas and lice were simply a fact of life, in the bedding, in the clothes, in that straw, and those rushes on the floor. Everyone from the lord down lived with them. It was not a mark of shame, it was just how the world was for everyone, all the time. And into this crowded, smoky, flea-shared world, people were born and got sick and died, all under the same roof, with almost none of the privacy or comfort we would expect. Childbirth happened in the home, in the chamber, attended by women, midwives, and female relatives and servants, with no physician, no pain relief worth the name, and a real and constant danger to both mother and child that hung over every birth. When illness came, and it came often, there was no true medicine as we understand it. Care meant herbal remedies, prayer, and rest, delivered by the women of the household or by the local clergy, in a world that did not understand infection and could do little against it. And death too happened here, in these rooms, witnessed and close, not tucked away in a distant hospital. Life inside a castle was lived shoulder to shoulder in every sense. You were born amid a crowd, you recovered or died amid a crowd, and through all of it there was almost nowhere to simply be alone. The longing for a private chamber that we saw earlier is not just about comfort. It is about the deep human hunger for a little space of one's own in a world that offered almost none. And it is worth pausing here to correct another thing the books get wrong, which is who actually ran all of this. We picture the lord as the master of the castle, and in law he was. But the lord was frequently away, off visiting his other estates, attending the king, fighting, hunting, or seeing to business elsewhere. And when he was gone, the person who truly ran the castle was very often the lady. Far from a delicate figure in a tower, the lady of a castle was in practice its chief executive. She managed the vast household, oversaw the servants and the stores, kept the accounts in order, saw that everyone was fed and the supplies would last the winter, and, when necessary, she took responsibility for the defense of the castle itself in her husband's absence. Running a household of this size was a serious administrative job that demanded intelligence, authority, and iron organization. The smooth working of that whole living machine we have been describing rested, more often than the stories admit, squarely on her shoulders. The castle you are standing in survives the winter because a woman is making sure it does. Now the sun is going down over our castle in the year 1200, and the day teaches its last and perhaps its hardest lesson, the one about the night. When darkness falls in this world, it falls completely in a way that we, who have never lived without electric light, can barely imagine. Beyond the small, trembling pools cast by the rationed candles and the banked fires, the castle sinks into a blackness so total it is almost a physical thing. The corridors are pitch dark, the stairways are treacherous. Step out of the firelight and you are essentially blind, feeling your way along cold stone with your hand. And with the dark comes a particular quality of medieval fear. This is a world that believes wholeheartedly in things that move in the night, in spirits and omens, and the very real dangers of thieves, fire, and sudden attack. So the castle does not simply go to sleep and trust the world. On the walls, the watch keeps its vigil through the long hours, guards pacing the ramparts in the cold, watching the black countryside for the glow of a torch or the sound of hooves calling out to one another to stay awake. The great gate is barred, and inside, most of the household is asleep on the floor of the hall long before we would even think of it, because there is nothing to do in the dark and every reason to be rested for the brutally early start. The night in a castle is long, black, and watchful, and it is one of the truest things about this vanished world. And now, with the whole day behind us, we come to the biggest myth of all, the one that reframes everything you have just seen. We think of a castle as a place built for battle, a fortress whose reason for existing is the dramatic siege. But here is the reality that surprises almost everyone. For most castles, most of the time, no siege ever came. Years, even decades, could pass with no enemy at the gate at all. The overwhelming majority of days in the life of a castle looked exactly like the one we have just walked through, cooking, cleaning, administering, hauling water, keeping warm, running the estate. The dramatic assault, the boiling oil, the storming of the walls, that was the rare exception, not the rule. So if a castle was not mainly about fighting, what was it mainly for? The answer is power. A castle was, first and foremost, a tool of control. It was the physical anchor of a lord's authority over the surrounding land and the people who worked it. Think about what that stone building actually did, standing there on its hill or above its river. It was the administrative center of the estate, the place from which rents and taxes were gathered, where the lord held his court and dispensed justice over the local people, where the business of ruling the countryside was done. It was a secure stronghold where wealth, weapons, and supplies could be kept safe. It was a base from which a relatively small number of armed men could dominate a wide area because the castle let them control the roads, the river crossings, and the land, and retreat behind strong walls whenever they were threatened. And it was, just as importantly, a message. The castle was a gigantic, unmissable statement in stone, towering over the humble homes of the peasants, and it said, without a single word, who was in charge here. Its sheer size and cost, and castles were phenomenally expensive, swallowing fortunes and years of labor to build, were themselves a display of the lord's wealth and might. The castle was medieval power made visible, a machine for controlling land and people that happened, when the rare crisis came, to also be defensible. And when that rare crisis did come, when an enemy finally did sit down outside the walls, Notice how the siege was usually decided, because it takes us right back to that humble well and those crowded storerooms. Sieges in this age were seldom won by one glorious assault up a ladder. They were won by time. The attacker's real weapon was patience and hunger and thirst. Cut the castle off from the outside world, ring it in, and simply wait, and let the defender's food and water run down day by day. The great question in almost every siege was not how brave the knights were. It was how many mouths were trapped inside those walls, how much grain was in the stores, and whether the well would hold. This is why everything we have talked about, the supplies, the well, the stores of grain and salted meat, the whole invisible logistics of feeding the household, was not just about daily comfort. In the crisis, it was the difference between survival and surrender. The castle, that great symbol of martial power, ultimately stood or fell on the same unglamorous foundation as everything else in the medieval world: food and water, and how long they lasted. There is one more thing the still image of a castle hides from us, and that is that this whole household could get up and move. A great lord did not own just one castle. He might hold several estates scattered across the land, and he and his household travelled between them, partly to govern each in person, and partly for a startlingly practical reason. A large household staying too long in one place would eat through the local food supply and exhaust it, and so, rather like an army on the march, the household moved on to be fed by fresh estates. When the lord left, the great hall that had blazed with fires and rung with voices could fall quiet, tended by a skeleton staff, its finest hangings and plate packed up and carried along with the family. The castle we have walked through was not always full. It breathed, filling with life and noise when the lord was in residence, and emptying to a hush when he moved on, a rhythm of arrival and departure that most of us never picture at all. So let us stand for one last moment in the bailey of our castle in the year 1200, as the light fades and the watch takes its place on the walls, and let us put back together the thing we took apart. It is cold, and it is dark, and it is full of the smell of smoke and animals and too many people in too little space. It is loud with work from before dawn until after dusk, and then silent and black through a long, watchful night. It is crowded, so crowded that to be truly alone is a rare and precious thing. It is a home and a headquarters, a farmhouse and a fortress, and a courthouse and a warehouse all at once. It is run not by magic, but by the unending labor of dozens of ordinary people whose hands carried every bucket and split every log, and it is very often steadied by the steady hand of the lady who keeps the whole machine alive. And beneath the grandeur, it survives on the plainest things in the world: bread, ale, firewood, and a well that does not run dry. That is the castle the storybooks almost never show you. Not the clean, sunlit fairy tale, and not the grim war machine either, but something far more human and far more alive. A great stone engine of survival, keeping warmth and food and order going against the cold and the dark, day after day, year after year. The banners and the knights were real, but they were the smallest part of it. The real story of the castle is the story of ordinary life carried on inside extraordinary walls. And once you have seen it this way, once you have felt the cold in the stone and smelled the smoke in the hall, you will never look at those grey ruins on their hills in quite the same way again. Behind every empty window was a fire someone had to feed, and a person trying, just like you, to get warm. If walking through this castle with us has changed the way you see those old stone walls, then please do the one thing that helps this channel more than anything else, and it costs you nothing at all. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey back back into the world we all came from. And tell me down in the comments, which part of daily life in the past would you most like to actually live for a single day? The most requested one is the one we bring to life next. Until then, thank you for watching. And remember, the next time you see a castle on a hill, don't just picture the battle. Picture the breakfast, the firewood, and the well, because that is what really kept it standing.